Cassian, and I somewhere read a quote, you can tell me if it's falsely attributed to you, but you said that they don't make movies like they did in the 70s and 80s, highbrow, character-driven thrillers or dramas. Is that true, and do you think that, like, why is that they're not making movies like that?
Well, the studios fell out of, they as they conglomeratized and became larger and larger, the desire to make profit increased, and so the guys that were running the motion picture areas of the studios were under an enormous amount of pressure to keep hitting home runs. And the only films that seem to be working for them in the last 5 years are basically comic books and remakes and sequels. And so when they sit there and they think about the fact that they still have an $800 million budget to make movies, and they think about it at the beginning of the year, okay, I don't want to take any risk, I'm going to just absolutely spend my $800 million and get back $1.2 billion if I can. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go and look at all the films that I've made recently, which ones actually work. Okay, I'm going to make a sequel to that. Okay, Brad Pitt wants to be in such and such a movie, and it's based on a best-selling novel, or it's a straight-up action movie, or it's a Marvel comic, or it's a whatever. And they just make the same nonsense over and over and over again, in my opinion, and they take very little risk. And so when you see a movie like Argo appear out of Warner Brothers, you're like, oh my God, how the heck did that slip through? And it's because, they have a relationship with Ben Affleck. He made The Town, which was, again, another movie that somehow slipped through. And it worked for them. And so for them, in their mind, okay, we can make a Ben Affleck movie, and we can make it for a price. And, George Clooney is the producer, and we do want to have a relationship with him. And there are other movies that we want him to star in, so yeah, we'll take a gamble on that. But that's the exception rather than the rule. And when you look through all the studios' lineup of all the movies that they're making, it's the same stuff over and over and over again. It's the same sequels to the movies they were. I mean, Disney made a genius move, I think, buying George Lucas's company, because they can milk the hell out of that library, and they can remake that movie 40 times, and they can make the sequels, and they can have those characters appear in other television shows of theirs, and they can just manipulate that library in a way that poor George Lucas would never have conceived of. And watch this franchise. Say too much about that, but anyway, but he sold it for $4 billion, and he's a smart guy, and he deserves it. But that's the way the studios think. They think, okay, I buy the Marvel library, I can remake all those Marvel movies, and then I can put all the Marvel characters in a movie together, and then I can take them all out and make some sequels to them again, and I can put them all back together again, and I can make 5 of those Marvel movies during the course of 1 year if I make a bunch of them that were successful, and maybe I'll only make 3 of them, but then I'll make another 5 next year, whatever. That's the way they think, because they know that if they make it for $200 million and they spend $50 million to market it, and the others, it's a sequel to a movie that already worked, there's a good likelihood that they'll get the money back and make a profit. And The Hobbit's the same kind of thing, and that, so the filmmakers, the ones that make these kind of movies, they look at their desire to be creative, and at the same time they're also thinking, okay, how do I make a movie? I know that I can't, like Jim Cameron can't get out of bed and make a movie for less than $200 million now at this point. So what is he going to do that's going to convince the studio? But they're going to be terrified to make something that's an original of his, that is not a remake or sequel or a character or something that's been seen before. I know that he's preparing Avatar 2 and Avatar 3 because, of course, that makes sense, and they'll pay him so much money to do those because the first one worked. The first one, when they did it, I think the studio gave half of it away. They got very worried about it, and I think Fox, maybe my memory's wrong here, I think they brought in Paramount, someone like that, to co-finance the movie with him because they were terrified that they were in it. But they had made so much money with him before that they were just like, hey, we gotta bite the bullet here and do this movie with him. And of course now they're thrilled that they did it, and they made a lot of money, and they're making all the sequels. But that's how they think. That's how the studios think. They don't think about making films for $30 or $40 million. They find that to be a giant black hole. Unless it's a little comedy with Judd Apatow where they know that domestically it could work, and they make it for a price, they don't want to make the highbrow films. They don't want to make the Argos. Those are the kind of films that actually they're very, very, very scared of. And that's left an enormous open field for independent filmmakers. So Catherine Bigelow will not be able to make Zero Dark 30 within the studio system, but she can get somebody independently to finance the movie. The studio will pick it up in America, and they'll do a good job of it, like Sony did with that movie. So for us, it's actually a benefit because the studios are making 5 movies a year instead of 15, and so they still have this incredible mechanism in place that distributes those films around the world, distributes them on ancillary rights in America, and DVD and TV, and all these other ways that they can make money from films, and they need films to run through that. So they go to companies like Full Circle, they go to companies that have output deals with them. They let those guys finance the movie and just hand them the movie when they're done and run them through the system, and it works very well. And so for an independent filmmaker, it's kind of, if you're making films that they don't really make anymore, and it somehow or other piques their fancy, like for instance, Lawless, which we worked on last year, the Weinstein company is like, okay, we could not have made that movie ourselves for that price. So we're happy to buy it from you in America for $5 million or $5.5 million, because we could never have made that movie for a price and ended up just owning America for that cost. So we'll buy it from you. So for us, that's a good deal, because we sold the international very well, and we had sold money in the movie, and $5 million basically made the movie break even. For the investors, we gambled on the upside of the movie performing, and the Weinsteins paid a price that they would like. So it works. The system works quite well for independent films these days, if you make the right kind of product for them. The films that they don't want the studios are films that open in New York and LA, and then they see what happens. There are companies that like those kind of movies, but they're much smaller and they don't pay very much for them. So that's the dichotomy that we live in. Most of the independent films that we work on are films that only open in New York and Los Angeles and work their way up and become successful. It's very rare to make an independent movie that is designed for 2,000 screen release, because if you can't sell it for that, what the heck are you going to do with it later? If you make a horror movie that costs you $25 million and the studio doesn't see it when they see the movie, and they go, I would never spend $25 million to release it, what are you going to do with that movie? You can't release a horror movie in New York and Los Angeles and hope it's going to work later. That's not how people that go see horror movies want it. They don't care about the reviews. They want the concept. So that's the business that we're in, is trying to find films that could potentially go on 2,000 screens, and at the same time mitigate the risk of the making of those that you can sell the international with all the stuff we just talked about.